Let's dispense with the pretense, shall we? Catherine said, crossing to a sideboard where a crystal decanter held amber liquid. Mother believes one of us took her precious pendant, and you're here to determine which family member is the thief. I'm here because your mother asked for help, Claire corrected gently, and because a valuable family heirloom is missing under concerning circumstances. Catherine poured herself a small measure of what appeared to be scotch, not offering any to Claire. What would you like to know, Mrs. Murphy? My whereabouts last night? My financial situation? My motive for stealing from my own mother? Let's start with something simpler, Claire suggested, taking a seat in one of the leather chairs. Your relationship with your mother. Catherine's eyebrows rose slightly. Complicated, as most mother-daughter relationships are. And with your siblings? Robert and Fiona? Robert is a disappointment to everyone, including himself, Catherine said bluntly. Brilliant mind, no backbone. He's run the family business into the ground through indecision and poor judgment. And Fiona? The prodigal daughter, Catherine replied, a hint of bitterness creeping into her tone. Escaped the family expectations to pursue her art in Paris. Shows up for Christmas and the occasional crisis, then disappears again. You resent her freedom, Claire observed. Catherine's eyes narrowed. I resent that some of us must bear the burden of family responsibility while others enjoy the privileges without the obligations. Is that why Fiona wasn't at dinner last night? Family tensions? Fiona avoids mother whenever possible. Their relationship has been strained since father died. And your son, Liam? Claire asked, changing direction. He seemed distant last night. A flash of something, pain, perhaps, or disappointment, crossed Catherine's features before her professional mask returned. Liam has struggled to find his place. In the family, in the firm, he lacks focus. But not intelligence, Claire noted, remembering the quick, assessing look in Liam's eyes despite his affected disinterest. No, not intelligence, Catherine agreed. Just motivation and judgment. What do you mean? Catherine sipped her scotch before answering. Let's just say Liam has made some unwise associations, accumulated debts in places where debt is dangerous. Gambling, Claire guessed. Among other vices, Catherine confirmed. It's being handled. And Ava, what's your relationship with your niece? Catherine's expression softened slightly. Ava is complicated, more intelligent than she lets on, more vulnerable than she appears. Robert failed her as a father after her mother left, and mother's criticism hasn't helped. She acts out for attention, like most neglected children. The assessment was surprisingly compassionate given Catherine's general demeanor. Claire decided to press a bit further. When was the last time you saw the pendant? Around mother's neck at dinner, Catherine replied promptly. She never removes it during social occasions until she's in her bedroom. And after dinner? Did you go to your mother's room at any point? Catherine's expression cooled. Are you asking if I stole it? I'm asking if you saw it after dinner, Claire clarified. No, I retired to my room around 11 to prepare for an early conference call this morning. I did not visit mother's room, nor did I see the pendant after dinner. And your whereabouts from 11 until morning? In my bedroom alone, Catherine said. Working, then sleeping. Not an alibi, I realize, but the truth nonetheless. Do you have any theories about what might have happened to the pendant? Catherine set down her glass, considering the question. If you're asking who in this family might have taken it, we all had opportunity. As for motive, she paused. Robert's business is failing more severely than mother realizes. Liam has gambling debts to unsavory characters. Ava's credit cards are maxed out and she's facing eviction. And you? Claire asked quietly. A cold smile touched Catherine's lips. I'm the only one in this family with a legitimate income, Mrs. Murphy. I have no need to steal from my mother. When she dies, the pendant comes to me anyway as the eldest daughter. Unless Margaret changes her will, Claire pointed out. Something flickered in Catherine's eyes. Has she indicated she plans to? Not to me, Claire replied, noting the reaction. I was simply observing that inheritance isn't guaranteed. Catherine's posture relaxed slightly. Mother is many things, but she respects tradition. The pendant passes to the eldest daughter. It always has. One more question, Claire said. Have there been other thefts in the house, or other instances of the pendant going missing? No, Catherine replied firmly. Despite our family's eccentricities, we've never had issues with theft. And Mother guards that pendant obsessively. It never leaves her possession except when she sleeps. As they concluded their conversation, Claire found herself with more questions than answers. Catherine Kerrigan was intelligent, observant, and clearly harboring resentments beneath her polished exterior. But was she a thief? And if so, why take the pendant now, when it would eventually come to her through inheritance? As they returned to the drawing room, Claire noticed Sean in deep conversation with Robert, who appeared increasingly agitated. Margaret sat watching them, her expression unreadable, but her posture rigid with tension. "Where's Liam?" Claire asked, noting the young man's continued absence. "Still searching for Ava," Catherine replied. "He's texted several of her friends, checked the local cafes. Nothing so far." Claire was about to suggest they try Ava's apartment again when the drawing room door burst open. Liam stood in the doorway, breathing heavily as though he'd been running. His face was pale, his expression stricken. "You need to come now," he said, his voice cracking. "It's Ava. I found her." "Where?" Robert demanded, stepping forward. Liam's eyes, wide with shock, moved from face to face before settling on his grandmother. "At her apartment," he said. "She's dead." Inspector Nolan had established an efficient temporary headquarters in the library, with officers taking statements in various rooms throughout the ground floor. As Margaret went to speak with him, Claire and Sean found themselves momentarily at loose ends, unsure of their role in the evolving situation. "We should probably give our statements about driving Ava home last night," Sean suggested. "It's relevant to establishing the timeline." Claire nodded, though her mind was still processing what they'd learned in James Kerrigan's study. "Do you think we should mention Ava's warning about the pendant? That it was the key to everything?" Sean considered this. Given what we now know from James's journal, it seems significant. Ava must have known something about the pendant's secret function. "Which raises the question of how she knew," Claire pointed out, "and whether that knowledge is connected to her death." Before they could pursue this line of thought further, Liam Kerrigan approached them, looking even more disheveled than he had earlier. His eyes were red-rimmed, his hands slightly shaky. "Dr. Murphy," he said, his voice hoarse. "Could I speak with you? Privately? Medical matter." Sean exchanged a quick glance with Claire before nodding. "Of course. Perhaps in the conservatory? It should be empty now." As Sean departed with Liam, Claire found herself drawn to the large windows overlooking the rear gardens of Thornfield Hall. The rain had stopped, but the sky remained overcast, casting a grayish pall over the manicured landscape. In the distance, she could see Robert Kerrigan pacing along a gravel path, phone pressed to his ear, gesticulating with his free hand in apparent agitation. "Quite the drama, isn't it?" Claire turned to find Catherine beside her, also watching Robert through the window. "I'm very sorry about Ava," Claire said sincerely. Catherine's expression remained composed, though Claire thought she detected genuine grief beneath the carefully maintained exterior. "Thank you. It's a difficult process. Despite her challenges, Ava was special." The brief vulnerability in Catherine's voice humanized her in a way Claire hadn't experienced during their previous interactions. "You cared about her," Claire observed. "She was my niece," Catherine replied, as if that explained everything. After a moment, she added more softly, "And she reminded me of myself at that age, before I learned to conform to expectations." Claire turned back to the window, giving Catherine space for this unexpected moment of candor. Robert had finished his call and was now standing motionless, staring up at the house with an expression Claire couldn't decipher from this distance. "What were you and Mother discussing in Father's study?" Catherine asked, her tone carefully neutral despite the directness of the question. Claire considered how to respond without betraying Margaret's confidence. She wanted to check some family documentation. Given the missing pendant and now Ava's death, she thought there might be relevant information there. And was there? "You'd have to ask your mother," Claire replied diplomatically. Catherine's mouth curved in a humorless smile. Loyalty, a rare quality these days. She paused, her gaze still fixed on Robert in the garden. "Did Ava say anything to you last night, when you drove her home?" Claire hesitated. "She was upset, mentioned financial problems. Nothing about the pendant or about Mother?" she said. Claire chose her words carefully. That the Kerrigans aren't what they seem, and something about the pendant being the key to everything. Catherine's posture stiffened almost imperceptibly. Interesting phrasing. Do you know what she meant by that? Ava had a flair for the dramatic, Catherine replied dismissively. She probably meant the pendant was key to solving her financial problems, if she could sell it. But there was something in Catherine's expression, a careful blankness, that suggested she understood exactly what Ava had meant. Your mother believes the pendant's disappearance and Ava's death might be connected, Claire said, watching for a reaction. Mother sees conspiracies everywhere, Catherine replied evenly. Age and isolation have made her paranoid. You disagree? I think my niece was troubled, deeply in debt, and saw no way out. Catherine's professional mask slipped momentarily, revealing genuine pain. It's a tragedy, but not a mystery. And the pendant, likely Ava took it, intending to sell it or pawn it, when she couldn't immediately convert it to cash and facing the consequences of what she'd done. Catherine didn't finish the thought, but the implication was clear. But the pendant wasn't found in her apartment, Claire pointed out. She could have hidden it elsewhere, or already passed it to a buyer. Catherine's gaze shifted from the window to Claire, suddenly sharp and assessing. Why are you so interested in our family pendant, Mrs. Murphy? The question carried a subtle edge, reminding Claire that beneath Catherine's polished exterior was a formidable attorney accustomed to cross-examination. I'm an art conservator, Claire replied truthfully. Historically significant pieces like the pendant are naturally interesting to me, especially when they go missing under unusual circumstances. Unusual, Catherine repeated, her tone cool. A troubled young woman takes valuable jewelry from her grandmother, then tragically takes her own life. Sad, certainly, but hardly unusual. Before Claire could respond, Sean and Liam returned. Liam looked marginally calmer than before, though still visibly distressed. He nodded briefly to Claire and his mother before continuing down the hallway, presumably to give his statement to the police. Everything okay? Claire asked Sean quietly as Catherine excused herself to speak with an officer. He was asking about anxiety medication, Sean replied, keeping his voice low. Liam's clearly struggling with Ava's death. They were closer than the family dynamics might suggest. Interesting, Claire murmured. Catherine just implied Ava might have stolen the pendant and killed herself out of remorse when she couldn't quickly sell it. Sean frowned. That doesn't align with the Ava we drove home last night. She was upset, yes, but not suicidal. And if she had just stolen a valuable pendant, why wouldn't she have mentioned it? It would have solved her financial problems. Unless she didn't take it for financial reasons, Claire suggested, remembering James's journal. If the pendant is actually a key to information that could damage the family, then taking it might have been about protecting secrets, not about money, Sean finished, understanding. A commotion near the front of the house interrupted their conversation. Through the open doors of the library, they could see Inspector Nolan speaking urgently into his phone, while several officers moved with purpose toward the main entrance. Curious, Claire and Sean followed, finding Margaret and Catherine already in the foyer, watching as police vehicles pulled up outside. What's happening? Margaret demanded of a passing officer. New development in the case, ma'am, he replied briefly before continuing outside. Inspector Nolan approached, his expression grim. Mrs. Kerrigan, we've had a report from Newcastle Harbor. A witness observed someone throwing an object into the water early this morning, around 5 a.m. The description matches your pendant. Margaret's face paled. Someone disposed of it in the harbor? We've dispatched our marine unit to search the area, Nolan continued. But I should prepare you. Recovery might be difficult depending on the exact location and the harbor conditions. Who was the witness? Catherine asked sharply. A local fisherman preparing his boat for the morning, Nolan replied. He noticed someone on the harbor wall because of the early hour and the poor weather. Didn't think much of it until he heard about the missing pendant on the local news bulletin this morning. This morning? Claire repeated. The pendant has already been reported in the news? Catherine's expression tightened with barely controlled anger. Apparently so, despite our request for discretion. Details of the investigation were not released by my department, Nolan clarified. However, the fact of a valuable missing jewel and its connection to the Kerrigan family appears to have leaked to local media. Margaret's hand went to her throat where the pendant would normally rest. Did the witness identify the person he saw? Only that it was someone in dark clothing with a hood or hat obscuring their face, Nolan replied. But the timing is significant. 5 a.m., only an hour before you discovered the pendant missing. Claire did a quick mental calculation. If Ava had died between midnight and 3 a.m., as the medical examiner estimated, she couldn't have been the one throwing the pendant into the harbor at 5 a.m. I'll be joining the Marine unit at the harbor, Nolan continued. I'll update you as soon as we have any developments. In the meantime, my officers will continue taking statements here. As Nolan departed, Robert burst through the front door, breathless and wild-eyed. Is it true? Ava's pendant was thrown in the harbor? Not Ava's pendant, Robert, Margaret corrected sharply. Mine. And yes, there's a report of something being tossed into the water early this morning. But who would? Robert began, then stopped abruptly, seeming to register the implication. If Ava hadn't disposed of the pendant, then someone else in the family likely had. Indeed, Margaret said coldly, a question we all should be asking. The tension in the foyer was palpable, with family members eyeing each other with varying degrees of suspicion and defensiveness. Claire noticed Liam had reappeared, hovering uncertainly at the edge of the group, his expression a mixture of grief and anxiety. Where is Fiona in all this? Sean asked suddenly. Has anyone contacted her about Ava? A look passed between Catherine and Robert, something like guilt or perhaps agreement. I called Paris this morning, Catherine acknowledged. Left a message at her gallery. She hasn't responded yet. Perhaps we should try again, Claire suggested, given the developments. I'll handle family notifications, Margaret said decisively. Catherine, please ensure all requested statements are provided to Inspector Nolan's team. Robert, pull yourself together and try to behave with some dignity. This is not the time for your usual histrionics. The dismissive tone seemed to strike Robert like a physical blow. His face flushed, then paled, and for a moment Claire thought he might actually challenge his mother's authority. Instead, he merely nodded jerkily and retreated toward what Claire assumed was the direction of the house's bar. Mrs. Kerrigan, an officer approached. We need your statement now if you're available. Margaret nodded, her composure perfect despite the morning's shocks. Of course. In the library? As Margaret departed with the officer, Claire found herself once again alone with Sean, Catherine having followed her mother and Liam disappearing back down the hallway. What do you make of this harbor development? Claire asked quietly. Sean ran a hand through his hair, a gesture she recognized as indicating his deep thought. It complicates things. If the pendant was disposed of at 5 a.m. and Ava died hours earlier, then someone else in the family took it, Claire finished, and possibly decided to get rid of it after discovering Ava's death. Or after causing it, Sean suggested grimly. The implication hung heavily between them. What had started as a missing jewelry case was increasingly looking like it might involve something far darker. The journal entry, Claire said, thinking aloud. James Kerrigan was being blackmailed about the pendant's true provenance. What if someone in the family discovered this and took the pendant to protect the secret? And Ava somehow knew about it, Sean continued the theory. Perhaps she confronted them and ended up dead, Claire concluded, made to look like suicide. They both fell silent, the weight of what they were suggesting sobering. Without evidence, they were speculating about murder within a grieving family, a serious and potentially damaging accusation. We need to tread carefully, Sean cautioned. These are still theories, not facts. Agreed, Claire said, but we should share our concerns with Inspector Nolan. The timing of the pendant being thrown into the harbor, the journal entry suggesting the pendant's significance goes beyond its monetary value. Ava's warning to us. We'll talk to him when he returns from the harbor, Sean decided. In the meantime, let's give our statements about driving Ava home last night. That's concrete information that could help establish the timeline. As they moved to find an available officer, Claire's phone buzzed with an incoming text. She checked it, surprised to see it was from Margaret Byrne, their neighbor, and the woman who had played such a crucial role in exposing the McKeever scandal months earlier. Need to speak with you urgently about the Kerrigan situation. I have information. Meet me at my house when you can get away. Claire showed the message to Sean, her eyebrows raised in question. Margaret Byrne has an uncanny knack for knowing everyone's business, Sean commented. After what happened with the McKeevers, I wouldn't dismiss any information she might have. I'll text her that we'll try to come by later today, Claire decided, quickly typing a response. As she sent the message, Claire couldn't shake the feeling that the Kerrigan family drama was expanding beyond the walls of Thornfield Hall, encompassing more players and higher stakes than a simple missing pendant. Whatever secrets lay buried in the Kerrigan past, they were beginning to surface, with potentially deadly consequences. The silence that followed Liam's announcement was absolute. For several heartbeats, no one moved or spoke, as if by remaining still they could prevent his words from being true. Robert broke first, a strangled sound escaping his throat as he staggered backward. Catherine moved to his side, her face bloodless, but her posture remaining rigidly controlled. "Dead?" Margaret repeated, her voice barely audible. "Ava?" Liam nodded, still standing in the doorway as if unable to fully enter the room with his terrible news. "I went to her apartment. The doorman let me in when she didn't answer. She was," he swallowed hard, "on the bathroom floor. Pills and whiskey." Sean immediately shifted into doctor mode, stepping forward. "Have you called an ambulance?" "Yes," Liam replied, his voice hollow. "And police. They're there now. They told me to notify the family." Margaret rose from her chair, swaying slightly. For the first time since Claire had met her, the formidable matriarch looked her age. Fragile, vulnerable, mortal. "I must go to her," she said. "Mother, the police will need statements," Catherine began, ever practical even in crisis. "Perhaps." "My granddaughter is dead," Margaret cut her off, a flash of her usual steel returning. "I will see her now. Everything else can wait." The next hour passed in a blur of activity. Sean and Claire drove Margaret to the harbor apartments while Catherine and Robert followed in a separate car with Liam. The short drive was conducted in silence, Margaret staring straight ahead, her hands clasped tightly in her lap, the empty jewelry box clutched between them like a talisman. At the apartment building, they were met by a somber-faced detective who introduced himself as Inspector Nolan. "Mrs. Kerrigan," he acknowledged with respectful deference. "I'm very sorry for your loss. I want to see my granddaughter," Margaret replied, bypassing any formal niceties. "Of course," Nolan agreed, "but I should prepare you. The scene is still being processed, and her condition." "I am 84 years old, Inspector," Margaret said with quiet dignity. "I have seen death before. Please take me to Ava." The detective nodded, leading them through the lobby to the elevator. As they ascended to the 12th floor, Claire noticed Sean exchanging a meaningful glance with Inspector Nolan, a silent communication between professionals that suggested shared concerns. Ava's apartment reflected her personality perfectly. Dramatic, expensive, and chaotic. Modern art adorned the walls, designer clothing draped over furniture, empty wine glasses and scattered jewelry suggesting a life lived impulsively and intensely. Crime scene technicians moved methodically through the space, photographing, documenting, collecting. Nolan guided them toward the master bathroom, where a white sheet covered a form on the floor. Medical examiner Dr. Chen looked up as they entered, his expression softening at the sight of Margaret. "Mrs. Kerrigan," he acknowledged, "my condolences." Margaret nodded once, her gaze fixed on the sheet-covered form. "May I?" she asked. Dr. Chen hesitated, then carefully folded back the sheet to reveal Ava's face. In death, she looked younger, more vulnerable, the defensive sarcasm and deliberate provocativeness stripped away to reveal the young woman beneath the carefully constructed persona. Margaret knelt beside her granddaughter, her movements stiff but determined. She touched Ava's cold cheek with infinite tenderness. "Oh, my dear," she whispered, her voice breaking for the first time. "What have you done?" Claire stood back, giving Margaret privacy in her grief, while Sean conferred quietly with Dr. Chen near the doorway. She couldn't hear their exact words, but their serious expressions and professional shorthand suggested they were discussing technical aspects of Ava's death. After a few minutes, Margaret rose with difficulty, accepting Claire's offered arm for support. Tell me what happened, Inspector, she said, her voice steadying as she addressed Nolan. The detective gestured to the prescription bottle and empty whiskey bottle on the bathroom counter. Preliminary evidence suggests Miss Kerrigan consumed a large quantity of sleeping pills with alcohol. The prescription was in her name, dated last week. We found a note on her bedside table. A suicide note? Catherine asked, having entered with Robert and Liam while Margaret was with Ava. Yes, Nolan confirmed, retrieving a clear evidence bag containing a sheet of Ava's personal stationery. It's brief. Through the plastic, Claire could read the shaky handwriting. I'm sorry. I couldn't bear the weight anymore. Forgive me. A. Time of death? Sean asked Dr. Chen. Preliminary estimate places it between midnight and 3 a.m., the medical examiner replied. We'll know more precisely after the autopsy. Claire's mind quickly calculated the timeline. They had dropped Ava at her apartment around 11:30. The pendant had been discovered missing at 6 this morning. If Ava had died between midnight and 3, and the pendant was still missing. Inspector, Margaret said, her voice surprisingly steady, there's another matter that may be related to my granddaughter's death. A family heirloom, a valuable sapphire pendant, was taken from my bedroom last night. I discovered it missing this morning. Nolan's expression shifted to alert interest. Stolen from your home? Removed, Margaret corrected carefully. There was no break-in, only family had access. And you believe Miss Kerrigan might have taken it? Nolan asked, his tone neutral but his gaze sharp. It's a possibility I cannot discount, Margaret admitted. Ava was facing significant financial difficulties. Mother, Robert protested weakly, surely now isn't the time. Now is precisely the time, Margaret cut him off. If Ava took the pendant, it should be here in this apartment, and if it is not, then we must consider other explanations for both its disappearance and her death. The implication hung heavily in the air. Claire glanced at Sean, seeing her own concern reflected in his expression. What had begun as a missing jewelry case had suddenly become far more complex and potentially sinister. Have your officers found any unusual jewelry in the apartment? Catherine asked Nolan. A large sapphire pendant in a platinum setting. Nothing of that description has been logged in our initial search, Nolan replied, but we can conduct a more thorough examination now that you've raised this concern. The search that followed was methodical and comprehensive. Every drawer, closet, and potential hiding place in Ava's apartment was examined. Margaret sat in the living room, her back straight despite her evident exhaustion, while Catherine paced and Robert stared out the window, occasionally dabbing at his eyes with a monogrammed handkerchief. Liam had disappeared again, presumably to give a statement to one of the officers. No sign of the pendant, Nolan finally reported, returning to the living room. We've searched thoroughly, including her safe, which contained only some costume jewelry and personal documents. Then she didn't take it, Robert said, a note of desperate relief in his voice. It must be someone else, or she disposed of it before. Catherine trailed off, unable to finish the sentence. Sold it, you mean, Margaret supplied, her tone flat, for money to cover her debts. If that's the case, Nolan said, we'll need details about the pendant to alert pawn shops and jewelry dealers. Though if it's as valuable as you suggest, it's more likely to have gone to a private buyer. I have photographs and documentation at home, Margaret replied, including the insurance appraisal. Then perhaps we should continue this discussion at your residence, Mrs. Kerrigan, Nolan suggested. My officers will complete processing the scene here, and Dr. Chen will oversee the transport of Miss Kerrigan's body to the morgue. As they prepared to leave, Claire noticed Sean in quiet conversation with Dr. Chen again. She approached them, catching the end of their exchange. Just strikes me as unusual given her history, Sean was saying. I agree, Chen replied. We'll run a full toxicology panel. Should have preliminary results in 48 hours. What's unusual? Claire asked as they stepped into the hallway. Sean glanced around to ensure they weren't overheard. Ava doesn't fit the typical profile for suicide by overdose. According to her medical records, she had no history of depression or self-harm. And the method? What about it? It's very neat. Prescribed medication, alcohol. A straightforward note. In my experience, impulsive suicides, which this would have been, given the timeline, tend to be messier, less organized. Claire considered this, remembering the Ava they'd driven home last night. Upset, certainly, but also angry and defiant. Not defeated. Not suicidal. "You think it wasn't suicide?" she asked quietly. "I think," Sean replied carefully, "that given the missing pendant and the family dynamics we've observed, we shouldn't jump to conclusions. Dr. Chen will conduct a thorough investigation, and the toxicology report should provide more clarity." Back at Thornfield Hall, the mood was somber as Inspector Nolan established a temporary command post in the library, coordinating with officers at Ava's apartment and interviewing family members individually. Claire and Sean found themselves in an awkward position, neither family nor officials, but somehow involved in both the missing pendant case and now, potentially, Ava's death investigation. "We should probably go," Claire suggested to Sean as they waited in a small sitting room off the main hallway. "This is a family matter now." Before Sean could respond, Margaret appeared in the doorway. Despite the morning's events, she had somehow found time to change into a simple black dress, her hair impeccably arranged, her posture unwavering. "Please stay," she said, her tone making it more command than request. "I value your perspective, and frankly, I trust you more than the police at this moment." "Mrs. Kerrigan," Sean began gently, "we're very sorry about Ava, but this is now a police investigation. We're not qualified." "My granddaughter is dead," Margaret interrupted, her voice steady but with an undercurrent of steel. "The same night my pendant disappeared. You may believe in coincidences, Dr. Murphy, but I do not." Claire exchanged a glance with Sean, seeing her own concerns mirrored in his expression. "You don't think Ava's death was suicide," she said, "not a question." "I think," Margaret replied carefully, "that there is more happening in my family than is immediately apparent, and I think you both sensed it from the moment you entered this house." It was true. From the strained dinner conversation to Ava's cryptic warning, there had been clear indications of deeper currents running beneath the Kerrigan family's polished surface. "If you have concerns about the circumstances of Ava's death, you should share them with Inspector Nolan," Sean advised. "I will in due course," Margaret agreed, "but first I want your help with something more immediate." She held out a small key. "My late husband's study has remained locked since his death, accessible only to me. I'd like you to accompany me there now, before the police finish their initial interviews." Curiosity overrode Claire's reservations. "Why us? And why now?" "Because," Margaret said, her blue eyes suddenly vulnerable despite her commanding presence, "I believe what we find there may explain both the missing pendant and perhaps even Ava's death, and I would prefer trusted outsiders to witness it before the family narrative becomes complicated." The phrasing sent a chill through Claire. "What do you expect to find?" "The truth," Margaret replied simply, "about my family, about the pendant, about everything that's been hidden for far too long." She turned without waiting for their response, clearly expecting them to follow. Sean gave Claire a questioning look, silently leaving the decision to her. After a moment's hesitation, Claire nodded. Whatever secrets the Kerrigans were harboring, they were now inextricably involved. Margaret led them down a corridor Claire hadn't seen during their previous visit, away from the areas where police were interviewing family members. They stopped before an imposing oak door with a tarnished brass keyhole. Margaret inserted the key, turning it with a heavy click that echoed in the silent hallway. "No one has entered this room in 15 years, she said, pushing the door open. "Not since James died." The study beyond was frozen in time. A large desk still held scattered papers and an antique fountain pen. A half-empty crystal tumbler sat on a side table. Bookshelves lined the walls, and heavy curtains filtered the morning light to a soft glow. The air was stale but not musty, suggesting the room was regularly cleaned, despite being sealed from general use. Margaret crossed to the desk, her movements deliberate as she pressed a hidden mechanism beneath its surface. A small drawer Claire hadn't noticed popped open. "James kept his most private papers here," Margaret explained, withdrawing a leather-bound journal. "I've never read them. Marital privacy was something we both valued. But after this morning—" She trailed off, her composed facade briefly cracking to reveal genuine grief. "What do you expect to find in there?" Claire asked gently. "Confirmation," Margaret replied, regaining her composure. of something I've suspected for years but never wanted to acknowledge. She opened the journal, carefully turning pages until she found what she was seeking. Here, she said, sliding the open book toward Claire and Sean. The entry was dated June 17, 1989, the handwriting precise and deliberate. M suspects nothing, thank God. The arrangement continues to function, though the strain grows greater each year. R visited again yesterday, demanding more money. I've transferred another £50,000 to the numbered account. This cannot continue indefinitely, but what choice do I have? The alternative would destroy everything we've built, everything M believes about our family. The pendant remains the key. If M ever discovers its true provenance, the entire house of cards will collapse. I've considered telling her the truth many times, but after 30 years of deception, how could she possibly forgive such a betrayal? Perhaps in death, the truth can finally emerge. I've documented everything in the safe deposit box at United Bank, number 472, accessible only with the pendant itself, which serves as both key and confirmation of the bearer's right to know. Claire looked up from the journal, finding Margaret watching her intently. The pendant is a key, Claire said, remembering Ava's words from the night before. Literally, not metaphorically. Margaret nodded. It appears so, and now it's missing on the same night my granddaughter died. Who is R mentioned in the entry? Sean asked. I have my suspicions, Margaret replied, her expression hardening, but I'd prefer evidence before making accusations. Claire reread the entry, focusing on the phrase true provenance in relation to the pendant. As an art conservator, she understood that provenance, the documented history of an object's ownership, was crucial to establishing authenticity and value. Your husband suggests the pendant's history isn't what you believed, she observed, that it might not have been in the family since 1913, as you mentioned. So it would seem, Margaret acknowledged, her tone carefully neutral, despite what must be a significant shock. The question is, what is its true history, and why was that history worth decades of deception and apparently ongoing payments to this mysterious R? Blackmail, Sean suggested. Someone knew the pendant's secret and was extorting your husband. Margaret's lips thinned. James was a proud man. The idea that he was being blackmailed for years without my knowledge. She didn't finish the sentence, but the pain was evident in her eyes despite her controlled exterior. The safe deposit box, Claire said, refocusing on the practical. Your husband says it contains documentation of everything. If we could access it. Without the pendant, we cannot, Margaret pointed out. According to James, the pendant itself is required. Presumably some unique aspect of it serves as the key. Claire's mind raced through possibilities. Many Art Deco pieces had hidden features, lockets that appeared solid, compartments concealed within the design. The pendant itself might physically open the deposit box. Or serve as identification, Sean suggested. Banks sometimes use unique objects instead of traditional keys for their most secure boxes. Margaret closed the journal carefully. Whatever its function, we need to find the pendant, not just for its monetary value now, but for the truth it apparently conceals. And you believe this truth is connected to Ava's death? Claire asked, trying to connect the disparate threads. I believe, Margaret said deliberately, that someone in my family knows more than they're admitting about the pendant, about James's secrets, perhaps even about what happened to Ava. A soft knock on the study door interrupted their conversation. Catherine stood in the doorway, her expression a careful mask of neutrality despite the evident surprise at seeing the long-sealed study open. Mother, she said, Inspector Nolan is asking for you. He has more questions about the pendant. Margaret nodded, replacing the journal in its hidden drawer before standing. I'll be right there. Catherine's gaze swept the room, lingering on the desk with its scattered papers. I didn't realize you had opened Father's study. There are many things you don't realize, Catherine, Margaret replied, her tone giving nothing away. Recent events have necessitated revisiting the past. A flicker of something, concern, alarm, crossed Catherine's features before her professional mask returned. The inspector is waiting in the library. As Catherine departed, Margaret turned to Claire and Sean. I would appreciate your discretion regarding what you've just learned, at least until we understand more fully what we're dealing with. Of course, Claire agreed, but if the information becomes relevant to the police investigation, then we will share it, Margaret finished. But on our terms, with context. James's reputation and our family name has endured for generations. I won't have it destroyed by misinterpreted fragments. As they followed Margaret back to the main part of the house, Claire couldn't shake the feeling that they'd only scratched the surface of the Kerrigan family secrets. A missing pendant that was actually a key, a dead granddaughter who had warned them the night before, a decades-old deception involving blackmail and hidden truths, and somewhere in the middle of it all, a patriarch's journal suggesting that the foundations of the Kerrigan legacy might be built on lies.